Okay, so I'm professionally an artist, and hello. And I have a company called Quick to Draw, which bases our idea is that we do these whiteboard animations, and they're very, very quick, and they tell the story of data that most people aren't that interested at the end of the day to read, so we make it fun. Where I started was I was living in Singapore, and people are very, very kind, very polite, but they just can't express themselves. And I had a client who came to me. He saw me caricaturing at parties. That's how I started. And he came to me and said he worked for Singapore Airlines, and they were starting a company called Scoot. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's just sort of like a small version, like British Airways has a smaller airline. And he couldn't get the team to have the courage to speak up. They were all terrified. And so he asked me to caricature at the beginning of a 2-day seminar and just break the ice. So we taught, we did a half an hour where everyone had to sit down and draw a caricature of each other, which is what you're going to do today. And you can see by the size of the notepads, we've really pushed the boat out with the drawing. Small is good here because you don't feel nervous. So we're going to do, we're going to combine business, digital, and art. That's really what this is about, is to use art as a tool, not to be afraid, to have the courage, to learn that you are an individual and you're special. And that is, brings me back to this image. It's a charity event that I got involved in where they just asked a whole load of artists, 100 artists, to draw a 20 by 20 canvas of the simplest icon that we know, which is the heart. And at the end, I'll show you a little video while we're doing questions and answers. And it's just phenomenal, the results that they got. And they asked every age, so there's 8-year-olds to 80-year-olds. So we're going to move on now. So we're just going to try to visualize, that's what we do. So I'm giving you some pictures. This is Scoot, and they started off very nervous, and then they started getting super animated and physical and dashing around the place. And that was the team that this guy was terrified that he would never be able to get them to bond. And we used art to do that. So coming back to the caricaturing, I put this up because this is the Scoot team. I want you to embrace caricaturing and know that you can do whatever you like, and it doesn't have to be a Michelangelo. So I just want you to feel confident about that. So, I'm just going to quickly show you, am I in the way? A video. It normally has music and a script, but we're not doing that today. This is Washington Gas, and I want you to take our company just a little bit more seriously than a cartooning company. Washington Gas, you can tell in the name that they're an energy company, and they actually spend millions investing in solar energy and also wind energy. And they could not get that message across. So no matter how many lovely, beautiful websites they did, they could not get the message across that they were environmentally friendly. So they hired us for that. So also understand that art is something that's been around a long, 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 long time. So we find in the digital age that we kind of forget that. We forget what we are, that we're human. And as you can see, we've got some cavemen, or cave father and son, and he's passing on the skill to paint. Okay, so this is a good example actually of how we do it. This simply captures my pen touching the screen 20 frames per second. So if I touch it 25 times, it's a second that you're seeing expensive. So technology has allowed me, with 30 years experience, and I've had to learn how to use this, to really use technology and do amazing things. Hopefully I think it's amazing. So we're going to have a little art lesson now, 5 seconds. I've left this up here, I want you to think about this title. And we're going to do a caricature of the person sitting next to you. Do you all know each other? You will by the end of this, okay? It's so funny, me standing here. Your expressions are fear and terror. We're here to have fun, okay? So don't worry. And that's why I showed you what the Scoot team did. It really doesn't matter. The point is that some people freeze. They can't even put pen on paper. Okay, so we're going to crack that. All right, you have 5 minutes. I will walk around and support you.
Okay.
Oh, very artistic, yeah. If you want to start again, do another one, that's fine.
Eyes are very important. You look like an alien now. I'm not doing very well here.
Sweet beers. Okay. And then do not that. Okay, let's see the body and I'll take a picture of that and put it on the screen. How are we doing? Keep going. Push it. You are all officially out of the box. Can I have hands up? Who's ever done anything like this before? Anyone? Never ever? Okay. What did it feel like?
Awkward.
Awkward? Did it feel empowering? No? And did anyone really hate doing it? No. Okay. You thought you would hate it? Okay, lovely, lovely. Anyone else got a feeling they want to share? Okay. So what we've got here is a newspaper clipping of an art. Oh, sorry.
Wondered it would have been more difficult, I think, if only one chose and you need to sit there. But now it was a kind of okay. I try my best, and the other person tries his best.
Exactly, and just sort of being together and doing just something that's actually quite childish and fun. But obviously, in the business place, you can't do that. But you got to feel. Oh, sorry. You got to feel art before you got to experience it before I can then go on to helping you really fall in love with it and see how you can use it in the workplace. So this is what happens when, if you're someone like David Hockney, you may not know the artist, but in England he's called a living Picasso. He's 76 and he does phenomenal work. And you might know a painting in LA where there's just a splash, somebody splashing into a swimming pool. But I'm not going to do a history art lesson. But the phenomenal thing is that he's holding an iPad, and his work was just done a few years ago. And this is all done off an iPad, very similar to, I wish, what I do. I do paint, I take this when I go traveling, hiking. It's an amazing tool. And he spent 2 years learning how to use the iPad. And so if anyone says to you, I'm too old to learn, I'm too old for digital, this guy is a perfect example of how it's for everyone. So also does anyone, well, I should cover this up. Does anyone recognize this artist right away? So in the 50s, Matisse did this at the very, very end of his career. And we're talking, he was in bed doing these. And I've got some wonderful pictures to share with you. So he didn't get out of bed, he worked. Does anyone work in their beds these days? Hands up. So he was one of the first who discovered working in bed. I'm just kidding. But it's quite extreme. Wow. So he was so talented and so ahead of our time, and he was incredibly creative, and he had such a massive influence with his cutouts. I was very lucky to go to one of his exhibitions. Has anyone been to the cutout exhibition? So people who worked with him worshipped him because they knew he was amazing, but he was not afraid to be adventurous and be creative, and neither is David Hockney. And when they do things, they do them large, and they're brave, and they obviously their lives are very fortunate, but I think that's where they got their energy from. They were creative, and that just opened up so many doors for them. So we take art very lightly, but the way it influences us, we have no idea, and it's around us all the time. And here we just have children. I mean, you could stick that in a frame in a gallery, and you could call it a Matisse. This actually is a Matisse, just so you know. Absolutely beautiful. I don't actually know how old he was when he did these, but now you know he did them from his bed. So we have no excuse. And here's another gorgeous kid. Colors. And I think when Matisse was doing this, we're talking about just after the Second World War, the 50s, 60s. So of course, color is just a big influence as well in his work. So I'm just going to show you this video while I'm talking, and then we'll wrap it up with answers and questions and answers. So this was a charity, and the wonderful lady who was launching it came up with this idea. She'd seen it before, and she wanted a different interpretation of the image of the heart. And it's really quite extraordinary. None of the artists really knew each other. They were asked to do this favor and come up with anything that inspired them. Some of the images are quite dramatic. Some of them are very light. The age group is from 8 to 80. Some of them are stolen from Picasso. There are no rules. There is no one saying you can't do this, you can't do that. What is amazing is that they were asked to do something, and they put some time aside, and they were given a chance to express themselves, some of them not artists at all. So we need to embrace art, and not just art, but creativity also means in the engineering industry, just creatively thinking of how you can get people just happier, thinking more in a happier way. It's hard because the digital world is not kind to us, but I think we just need to be reminded that we are human.
Well, you said something beautiful about creativity. I think it's one of human innate power and skill. You just demonstrated that we can all, maybe we won't be a Picasso or a Matisse, but we can all create, as long as we allow ourselves and we open ourselves to that. So I really like that.
But, and also, if you're a leader, then you need to nurture that and guide people, and they will do amazing things.
I'm just curious how you use your art form for corporate work, and how varied is it? And how wide?
It's incredibly varied. Yeah.
Do you have any examples?
I do. You're challenging me in my technology, which is great. I love it. Okay, so we've got. I might have to go through some of my files, but you'll see the engine of this. Okay, so we did some work for, I don't know, has anyone been to the NEC in Birmingham? It's one of the biggest corporate event organizing companies, and they wanted a video. So we've done a 25 years millstone video for them. This is just a sample. So they wanted their logo, they want branding, they want each sample, I'm just wondering, they wanted to mention Google. One particular bank uses me for all their internal communications because they will have an important message, maybe a rumor that's people might be losing their jobs and it's actually not the case, so they would write a script. Is that answering your question? So they find out that I can tell us quite a serious story and lighten it, and that's usually the problem, is that people are afraid to read documents but they're happy to watch a whiteboard animation one. So we follow the story. They'll say angry clients, happy clients, 30%, 3 years running, success. So it's very, very, very simple.
Yeah, all corporations struggle with key messaging, right? You have to repeat it 7 times, and I think this will stick.
Absolutely. It seems very simple that it says 30%, but if I turn that off, you would remember 30% tomorrow, the next day. So it's very, very simple, but it's, I get very, the raw data is quite hard to make light, but I love the challenge of taking information and visualizing it so that everybody understands it. I do have a history of not being able to read or write at school, so I do understand what it's like not to understand what I'm reading, and it's very frustrating, and it costs companies a lot of money when they get it wrong.
Different thing,
Yeah, we have the bank that I do a lot of work for. They obviously want to check that everyone's looked at the work and read it or watched it, and then they ask for comments, and one guy said he loved it so much he watched it 12 times. I don't think you get many people saying that about documents. I think that's it, really. Any more questions, or we're happy? Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much, Andy.
You're welcome.
And I guess you'll be around, so if people have any questions for later, you can find them.
If anyone wants an oil painting class, not on an iPad, just give me a shout.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.